become a demonologist, you have to go through decades of training. You have to apprentice under either a seasoned demonologist or a seasoned exorcist. And I'll tell you, and you're tested every step of the way. So what do I do about it? And I could just go right down the list. All these people that say, oh, I'm a demonologist or I'm an exorcist, it's like, on TV, it's like, now on the Travel Channel, we're going to show you a real exorcism. That's baloney. It's absolutely baloney. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me because there's people there that you don't even know their names, that they die without you even knowing their names, and they protect everyone, and people don't know them because the ones that are really, really good, you don't know about them.
Well, Al, we're running out of time, but before we do, let's get your website. We have like about a minute left. Let's get your website so or where can they find you?
The best way to find me is through Facebook. I'm al-willen, ALWILLEN, and I have a Green Lantern, insignia because it's like I like that. But and I have an email address which is ghosts, GHOSTS, @viryours.com, VIRYOURS, and just so that Sean Graham doesn't think I ignored him. Have you ever come in contact with a holy man that you felt was holy before you met? And the answer is yes. It happens all the time.
Yes, very much so. And there's a story, but since we don't have time, we'll have to talk about it later on. And I really, really appreciate your time here tonight.
It has been my pleasure. You. I entered in this process with you. I feel better. It's like you have. People have been praying that I feel better. So thank you very, very much, Richard. I enjoyed it.
God bless. God bless. And talk soon. God bless.
God bless you, too. Good night.
Good night. Okay, everybody. You're listening to the Richard Spaoff Show here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. I'm going to read you a little bit about our next guest. I'm happy to have him here as well. Mark Anthony is a psychic lawyer. He also is known as a psychic explorer. He is fourth-generation psychic medium who communicates with spirits. He is also a successful attorney, licensed to practice law in Florida, Washington, D.C., and before the United States Supreme Court. That's wonderful, I tell you. Mark graduated from Mercer Law School with honors, which included the study of law at Oxford University in England. He also studied mediumship in England at the Arthur Findlay College for the Advancement of Psychic Science. He is the best-selling author of Never Letting Go and Evidence of Eternity. Mark has appeared on nationwide TV and radio shows. He's recently appeared on CBS TV's hit show, The Doctor. Well, here he is here on Night Dreams Talk Radio. Hello, Mark. Are you still with us?
I sure am, Richard. It's great to be here. How you doing?
Good.
It sounds like it's going really well.
Yes. And I'm so happy to hear your voice. I mean, you have so many. It's been a while since we talked, in fact, huh?
It has. I think it's probably been at least 5 years.
Wow.
And yeah, I think at the time you were doing a blog talk show, and it's really great seeing how your career has exploded. I think it's just really great. So thanks for having me on.
You're welcome, and love to have you here. I'm excited. I'm happy to have all the guests that we have, but excited for you to be here. Now, to start off with, you were on that CBS show. I was watching a little bit of that video. Could you explain what that cold case was about and how you got involved and all that kind of stuff?
I was invited to be on the CBS show, The Doctors. And The Doctors is really great because actually Dr. Phil created the show, The Doctors. So it's out at CBS Paramount Studios in LA. And what they asked me to do is a couple days before the show, they asked me to show up at this other studio. And I had no idea what me, which is really good because as a medium, if I'm going to do a reading for somebody, then I don't want to know anything about them or the case in order to guarantee the quality. And you understand that, Richard.
Yes.
So I went to the studio, and they asked me to do a reading for this gentleman and this lady, and he was the father, and it was the cousin of a woman named Allison Feldman, who'd been brutally murdered 2 years before in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the case had run ice cold. The police were not getting any leads at all. Without going through all the details of the case, what happened was I kept getting, from Allison's spirit came through, and she kept telling me that the police were missing something, particularly with the DNA, and that they needed to expand the parameters of the DNA. Then she said, the killer will be behind bars when the police figure out who he is. He will be arrested on something else. And so then there was a couple other things that she brought up. Long story short, I did the reading, and I was on the doctors, and the interview went extremely well. And then apparently Allison's father took the information that I gave him and went to Phoenix Police and kept saying, you need to expand the parameters of the DNA test. And I kept getting two names, Franklin and Terrence. Franklin and Terrence. And that wasn't making any sense.
Right.
So the police in Phoenix decided to introduce for the first time a new DNA test called familial DNA. And what that does is it broadens the parameters of the typical DNA test. And when they did that, they started picking up markers on this one guy that was in jail in Arizona. Okay. And essentially, this was a close relative of the killer, because there was some DNA collected at the scene. Because what he did to this woman was absolutely horrific and horrible. Just beyond,
Can we go into a little bit of what he did?
He brutally raped and murdered this woman.
Oh gosh. Okay.
In her own home. And the thing is, Allison Feldman, she was a pharmaceutical rep. She was an upstanding member of the community. She was a nice person. No criminal background. She had a steady boyfriend, in fact, her fiance. And, of course, the police immediately, which is par for the course, they checked out the boyfriend, and his alibi was ironclad. And there was DNA collected at the scene, but the guy was, he did a lot of cleanup after the murder, put bleach all over the place, but there was still some DNA that they collected from underneath her fingernails, because apparently she fought back. And so when they did the familial DNA test, they started picking up on markers, and it was the brother of this other guy whose name is Ian Mitchum, and he got a fourth DUI, fourth drunk driving charge. The police took a blood sample from him, and that gave a direct match to the DNA. And this was the first time in Arizona history that the familial DNA test had ever been used. And here's what's so interesting about this, Richard, is it's only being used now in about a dozen states. And the two names that I got, Franklin and Terrence, from Allison's Spirit, transmitted those names to me. Well, the very first time familial DNA was ever used was in the state of California, and it was instrumental in catching the grim sleeper serial killer whose name was Lonnie Franklin. Okay, so there's the name Franklin.
Right.
And the name Philip or Terrence in 2018 in the state of New York, there's a man by the name of Terrence Phillips who is challenging the validity of the DNA, the familial DNA test. So it's really interesting that her spirit transmitted names that were right on point with the familial DNA test. At this point, Ian Mitchum is being held without bond, as he should not be given bond, and the investigation is apparently ongoing, because there were other things that came through but because the police are not releasing any details at this point, we can't verify that. But everything that came through from Allison's spirit to me at this point in time has come to pass.
Well, my question to you is, do the police, how do they feel about you? Do they always question, or do they check it up? What are they very helpful towards what you are saying, or what?
Well, there's nothing new about psychics assisting police.
Yeah.
In fact, even in the Jack the Ripper case back in the late 1800s in London, the police in London consulted with a couple different psychic mediums. In fact, one of them that was Queen Victoria's personal medium, which is rather an interesting story in and of itself.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Well, what had happened was Queen Victoria was very happily married to Prince Albert, and which is really interesting because with royal marriages, they're usually arranged marriages, but in her case, she and Prince Albert really, really loved each other tremendously. And so what happened was Prince Albert died, I think when he was age 42, and it was around the year 1860. And he had died of typhoid. And so Prince Albert dies. Queen Victoria is devastated. And there was a 13-year-old boy in London. His name was Robert James Lees. And he was brought to Buckingham Palace and supposedly connected Queen Victoria with the spirit of Prince Albert. And not only did he do this, Richard, on a regular basis, but he supposedly lived in Buckingham Palace. So basically, Queen Victoria moved him right on in, and he became part of the royal entourage. And, you know, we're talking a teenage boy. Well, London police called him a lunatic, and they refused his help when he tried to go to them in the Jack the Ripper case. However, Scotland Yard, on the other hand, did use Robert James Lees to provide information when Irish separatists, known as the Fenians, bombed or tried to bomb Parliament. And so he has a background in law enforcement in London.
Right.
In 1899, there's actually a letter from the Privy Office, which was basically Queen Victoria's, press corps. She sent him a letter thanking him for a copy of his book, because by that time he was, an older man, and he had written, let me see, if he was born in 1849 and in 1899, I guess he'd have been 50. He actually died in 1931. So this guy, he lived pretty good time. Long story short, so there's evidence that there was communication between the Buckingham Palace and Lees. And here's what's interesting about Queen Victoria. The British monarchy, they have been involved with psychics and mediums for centuries. I mean, going back even further to the court of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. But Queen Victoria, when her beloved husband, Prince Albert, when he died, even though she lived another 50 years, she insisted every morning that his clothes be laid out. So talk about grieving. I mean, she because we think of Queen Victoria as this frumpy old lady. The fact of the matter is, she had like 5 children, and at one time she was a beautiful young princess.
Well, no wonder why she was grumpy after 5 kids.
After 5 kids, and then her husband dies. She had a difficult time, and she still had the royal protocol of his clothes being laid out. So anyway, grief strikes everybody, no matter if you're the Queen of England or somebody living along the side of a road. I mean, death is the great equalizer, and it affects all of us. But to get back to your question, psychics and mediums have been used with law enforcement for centuries. Now, your question